know, Braxton on like a personal level.
Yes.
Instead of just professional.
Well, I know it's like we've got to know each other a little bit more, but then in the professional setting. But I'm loving getting to know you even more as time's gone on.
It's fun.
Well, welcome everybody. We're starting our conversation. We're having this conversation. We might as well start it on the live too. But we are the Sexplorers, Braxton Dutson and
Cammy Hurst.
and we are here today because we're going to do the start of season 2.
I'm so proud of us. We got to season 2.
We got to season 2, and we did it. We were able to finagle it without having months and months in between, because we're going to go season 3 after the summer, just because summer is so intense.
Yeah, it is, juggling so many things in the summer, and we need a break too. So it's much more realistic to do this in 6-week intervals than to commit to every single Monday for the rest of our life.
Absolutely, which is, it's a lot. That would be a lot. So we are going to be going over the book Love Worth Making today by Dr. Snyder. And but beforehand, we were continuing this conversation mostly because Cammy's just got back from a wonderful vacation, it sounds like.
Yes, I have. It feels like a Monday. I'm dragging my feet a little bit. My husband is a CPA and a financial planner, but that means that February, March, and April at our house, he's just gone. He's really busy. So every year after tax season, we go to Mexico to an all-inclusive resort, and we just sit by the pool and play and relax, and it's fantastic.
That is what I wanted to know. I was going to say, I have a friend that I work with, and that is her gig, which is just plop on the beach or by the pool and stay for 5 days. So I would love to know anyone that either is watching or currently watching or is watching later. Please leave a comment with, are you a planner activity going, or are you a plopper where you just plop down and you do your thing?
Right. When we take our kids, we try to take them on a vacation once or twice a year, and we plan all the activities, right? But when it's just my husband and I or adult friends, we just want to rest. And so we plop and listen to books. And we did go snorkeling because I love boats and I love snorkeling. And so we usually get on a boat at some point. It's not my husband's favorite, but he knows it's mine. I love being on boats. It's just the power of the wind and the water, and it fills me up spiritually. Just sun and wind are like, this sounds so woo-woo, but they're like forces that relax me. Like the anxious coil in my stomach unwinds if I'm near water and wind. So
that is good to know. I would say that I'm more of one that's like, I want to go do things and experience them. So if we're like, hey, we're just going to sit on a beach for 4 or 5 days, I can do that for a little bit. I'd need to be in the shade.
Yes.
I don't know if it's the boredom. Maybe it's boredom. I like the activities. I like doing the different things that are like, oh, we're going to go do this and we're going to go do that. So I have to be careful because it can turn into work, like what you're saying. And then it's like taking time to actually just calm down. But I'm 100% with you. Mine I would say is when it's a little bit cooler and any fresh water. I like listening to the waves. I like being on the ocean for a little bit. I love listening to the ocean is a huge deal. But when it comes to like streams or lakes and a boat, that's
You're
where
a lake guy. You like lakes.
Yeah. Very much so. So I like to be able to drink the water I'm in.
Yeah.
And don't come at me with whether it's healthy or not. I mean, we could go on that. That would be a whole nother process. I grew up drinking canal water, so My internal immunity system is quite high just
You are
from
strong.
being exposed.
You have an iron digestive system.
Absolutely. Well, we'd love to hear what your vacations are. When it comes to do you plan? Do you not? Does it change if you're with kids or if you're by yourself? What makes a trip versus a vacation? Are
Mhm.
you freshwater or are you saltwater? I'd love to
Yeah.
know any of those. So, but beyond that, let's start into. We've got Love Worth Making, the Sexy Book Club. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm gonna
Yeah, we've
share
got
that
a
one.
book
Oh, you
review this
already got
morning.
it. Yeah. Oh man, it shared the wrong page.
That's okay. You can see there's 2 different editions. The first one has got some waves there and the
Yes.
second edition is yellow with little fireworks, I think what they're supposed to be on the front.
Yes, the little fireworks, 2 fireworks going off, and yeah, there's that.
Now, I've
So,
actually heard Steven Snyder speak.
have you really?
I have. So, part of my PhD program, he taught like a 4-hour course, a lot on this book. So, that's where this book came into my consciousness. As I'm like,
Oh,
okay, I took
okay.
a class by Steven Snyder. He's an MD, psychiatrist, but a sex therapist too. So
Yes.
he's a prescriber, but he does psychotherapy with individuals and couples around sexual issues.
Mhm. Which is why in the book, he talks about prescribing
Mhm.
is it PH5 inhibitors? PE5 inhibitors? I can't remember
Mhm. Yeah.
that one is, yeah.
Mhm.
So
Viagra
yeah,
and
he prescribed,
Cialis.
yeah, the
Yeah.
Cialis. Well, I'm curious. We've got different topics that we can start off on, but I would say just at the very beginning, I had a hard time getting into this book. What about you, Cami?
Yeah, we were texting and the first half was hard for me. The second half got better. Um,
Yes,
and I have a theory.
I have a theory
on-
too. I want to hear your
okay.
theory. I've got my theory.
Okay. So once we have our theories, there's 6 points we'll go over in the book.
Yes.
But I have a theory on what was hard for me. So in the relationship world, so I'm an MFT, so I have a lot of background in marriage and family therapy and systems. And the research suggests that traditional relationship structures work fine as long as both people are committed to the traditional structure, which is more of the male is the head of the household. There's more of a hierarchy of power in the home. And in and of itself, that's not a harmful system as long as all are on board with it. However, starting about 20 years ago, many couples started switching from a traditional relationship structure to a partnership relationship structure where power is shared. There's more equality in the family about decision making and power and balance. I believe that Steven Schneider is writing this to couples who have more of a traditional relationship structure than a partnership relationship structure. And because I prefer a partnership structure, some of it was hard for me. It was not as feminist informed as other books we've read. And not saying one is right or one is wrong, but that's good to know when you're picking it up is I want more of a traditional structure book. This would be good for you. If you have more of a partnership relationship structure, you might not love this book because you may have more feminist ideals incorporated into your relationship.
And you get distracted with wording and approaching. I would agree with that 100%.
That's my theory. What was
I
your
like that theory.
theory? Tell me
Mine
your
is
theory.
I got caught. So for the trajectory of the book, like I was this close to just being like, okay, I really don't want to use the rest of my time reading this book. It got to that point, I
Yeah.
think until chapter maybe 4. It's hard when I'm listening. I forget which chapters we're on.
Mhm.
But I think my big hold up there and where it changed was when he got caught up on the infancy, and
Mhm.
there was a lot at the very beginning of like, oh, we go back to a 2-year-old and it's just yes, no. And I think he started to really like almost pushing it so far into a dyad of it being like approachable or not approachable. And then saying, oh, you're a 2-year-old.
Your
that it got worse.
sexuality is basically an infant and a 2-year-old,
Mhm.
and simple yet selfish, and a lot of Freudian concepts about mother-child, projecting that onto the sexual relationship, that a lot of us don't incorporate Freudian theories into our,
Mhm. I
um
think that's what's throwing me.
yeah.
I would say that I think that the Freudian theories, the concept starting to compare to, like, your mother's breast versus your partner's, and, like, that was throwing even my personal sexual. I'm like, "Okay," so oftentimes I'll put
Mm.
myself into, like, the book and be like, "Oh, well, where's this and where's that in my experience?" And I'm like, "Woo, this
You're
is a
not wanting
hard
to
one."
picture your mom when you're with your
No,
partner. Mm-mm.
no, and it's like, do you found I'm like, I can't even remember that part of my life typically, so
Mhm.
no, that's not what I'm envisioning. But as soon as we started getting more into, um, where chasing was involved, or there was more, how do we build the connection? What do people want? Why do they want that? Um, how does it move away from, oh, and I love that he kept challenging magazines. I'm a sucker for those that'll challenge Cosmopolitan and Men's Magazine, but that's my own personal vendetta. So maybe that's just what started. That
Mm.
was the theory I had, is as soon as we moved a lot more past that, and then he was only putting nods towards it versus super focused, I started getting much more in and was like, oh, okay, great. So
Yeah,
that's my
that
theory for what.
foundational idea about comparing our sexual self to our infantile self and the connection with our mother during, all that nursing and caretaking, and really
Mhm.
paralleling that with sexual surrender feels icky, feels very Freudian,
Yeah.
probably
Yeah.
wasn't well accepted, um, by you or I.
I think so. I think it made it very. There was a lot of, like, oh, this is how. Oh, that was the other thing, is there was a lot of, like, and then I fixed it, and then I fixed it, and then I fixed it, and I was like,
Mhm.
you know what? You sound like a really boss therapist, and I've had a couple of those. And if I wrote a book only on the ones that saw me for about 3 weeks, I would sound like a
Mhm.
pretty dang good therapist too.
Mhm.
But
Oh,
not
I love
everyone
those
sees it
clients
that.
where they come in 3 times and they only needed this, like, education. They're like, "Oh, I thought that, no, oh, yay, we're happy now." Yeah,
Yeah.
there were a lot of really simple examples of success in the book. And as
Yes.
a therapist, I know we all know we fight harder for success than that, so it might have
Mhm.
felt too simplistic.
Yeah. So those are my thoughts. But let's start into some of the key points.
Mhm.
So the first one is, reaching true arousal is possible once you've learned how to nurture your sexual self. So when I was thinking of this concept where you're reaching true arousal and it being possible by learning to nurture your sexual self, I like the way that, like, the examples that he brought in where you I can't remember their names, but one of the ones that's sticking out to me is where nurturing the sexual self could involve masturbation, could
Mm.
involve permission giving. Because the first couple of, female individuals that he brought in or gave the examples of, a lot of it was like, I can't have this fantasy. This
Mhm.
fantasy is wrong. I can't masturbate like this because this masturbation technique is wrong. And it gave so much distress. And as soon as they started nurturing themselves in the way of, like, this is okay, I can just relax, this is a fine thing. All of a sudden, sexual expression became much more approachable. Orgasm came, easier for them, and they didn't have this icky feeling that it sounded like they were bringing into the sexual situations that they were in, and that seemed to bring up even more, um, better based, arousal, if you will. So I'm curious, what were your thoughts on that?
No, I 100% agreed with this point. Um, that often when I'm working with a new client, this is where we start, is let's figure out your sexual self. And for a lot of my clients, there's either shame around their sexual self and judgment, or there's just nothing because it's been so repressed
Mhm.
that it's a blank screen. And we have to do a lot of work with, learning about our sexual self. I sometimes call it our sexual personality or our erotic map. And um, I do like that he says we need to approach this with non-judgment, and that's hard for a lot of people who've grown up in a traditional environment. And another point he makes with this is that arousal is ultimately up to us and not completely on our partner. And I think
Yes.
that that is a fantastic point. That for many couples I work with, they're waiting for the other partner to turn them on.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of pressure, and that we need to be responsible for our own arousal, that we need to be the expert of our own arousal, and we can share that with our partners so they can help arouse us. But ultimately, it's an internal experience that we're sharing with someone.
Agreed.
And it's not completely an external performance on the other person's part to get us to think or feel something.
And I think that that plays into, again, another nod towards if we don't have any type of sexual education, or you have a partner that's supposed to own and know your sexual arousal pattern and what you want currently in the moment, plus you lose, or that maybe both of you or your partner hasn't had a sexual education about anatomy, typical
Mm-hmm.
anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
um it's really hard to even start moving in that direction, and you're supposed to not do this without, or you're supposed to do it without really communicating what you want or need. You just kind of have to
Mm-hmm.
know. It really sets up like, well, I guess I'll start going in that direction, and your partner could be going way off, and then frustration ensues.
Yeah,
um,
mind reading and sex will probably lead us both to being frustrated.
Absolutely. And so that communication plus knowing yourself plus having a partner that kind of understands, and then you start to learn each other.
Mhm.
I guess it was one part of this book that I did like, that it's not so much, hey, how do you have an amazing one night stand? This is very focused on how do you build intimacy, emotional, sexual energy within a relationship to really experience lovemaking, not just great or orgasmic. Like, how do we get to the orgasm? And that was one aspect of it. Like, you got to own yours, communicate it, and then essentially practice.
Mhm. Yeah, his audience, Dr. Snyder's audience in this book he's very clear that this is a book for heterosexual couples in long-term committed relationships.
Yeah.
So that's the niche in this book, which is a lot of my clients, you know?
Yeah.
And I do like that he started with nurturing our sexual self. It might have gotten a little simplistic, and I don't know that I loved the analogy, but he did compare our sexual self, like you said, like to a 2-year-old. And I don't know that if I loved that, but I think it was the way he was portraying it's simple,
Hmm.
that happy vaginas are relaxed and wet and eager, and happy penises are erect and calm and eager. And listening to our body, that um, sometimes it will know something we don't. Listening to our sexual self, that was part of it, is that
Hmm.
um, a non-erect penis is an unhappy penis. I don't know that I loved that analogy, but I did like the encouragement to listen to our body, and that sometimes when there's a sexual dysfunction, it might be trying to tell us something
Yeah.
very simple about the situation or our own lives or our partner. I didn't love the analogy used to get there, but I did like the main point.
Yes. I also like that it was brought into, it doesn't have a language of,
Mm.
oh, I don't like this because of blah, 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 blah. It's just, that's not sexually arousing. It's not this. No.
Doesn't work
Or
for me. Nope.
yes. Yep. And
Yes,
if it doesn't
works for
work,
me.
it's a no, it's a yes.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I did like that aspect of it too. And that the questioning then starts after that, which is, well, why is it a no right now?
Yes.
What is happening? Why is it a yes? Why is it a no? Versus, and that helped with a lot of the examples he gave from, like, well, I get to this place and then it just goes away. Well,
Stops.
you're stopped. There's a no, that as soon as you start to get to your peak of arousal and maybe orgasm, your
Something
body says
happens. Let's learn
no.
from it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I like that too. But it was a little simplistic when it came to that. I don't know. There's some back and forths within there.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that brings us to our next point, which is essentially sex should never feel like work. That that aspect of it, I think the work was one of the big points where it leads to a no. If you feel like you've got to work, oftentimes that really affects how much you want to engage in a sexual experience or address the arousal.
I have mixed feelings about this one.
Tell me about it.
Because my sample size is skewed. I have a lot of people working really hard and making a lot of progress in their sexual lives,
Mhm.
and it has been honorable work for them. And it has brought a lot of progress. So I understood the main point that sex is a form of adult play. It should be playful. He talked a lot about there should be moments when we're laughing, or um, it should feel to us as play felt as children,
Mhm.
relaxed, easy. But I think it's the latest statistic is 68% of individuals will experience a sexual dysfunction of some sort throughout their lifespan.
Mhm.
And they have to work, 68% of the population will have to work through some type of sexual dysfunction, either with their own anatomy or some mismatch between their partner and them. And so,
Is that in the lifetime? Was that
mhm,
identifying? Oh, that
mhm,
makes a lot of
mhm,
sense.
mhm.
Yeah.
And so, and I felt it be like work. There are times, especially I have 4 children. In the middle of that, it was a lot of work. I had to do all the things to keep my desire up.
Yeah.
And I had to be very intentional, and it was work because I was prioritizing something that mattered. Um, but to say if it doesn't come easy, it's not right, I think is oversimplistic and overlooks a significant population that has to do work to maintain desire or to maintain arousal or
Mm.
um, and so
Well, let's maybe help me with this one. Can you define work?
I guess maybe that's the yeah,
Let's
what would you
define
say?
work because you're making a beautiful argument to this, and I was experience like as I'm hearing you talk, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm defining it differently. So I'd love
Mm,
to hear how do you define work? Because I don't think he
eff-
defines it in the book. I think he
that's a
just
good
says work.
question. So in the way I was just describing, I was defining work as effort toward wanted change, that the change was not coming naturally or easily,
Mhm.
and it took intentional effort to achieve certain outcomes. That's how I'm defining work. And
And
and how do you define work in
yes, I
this
was gonna say
chapter?
the way
Yeah.
I was conceptualizing this, which I think is important, is because I agree with what you just said on how that would be seen as work and how we'd see that as work. My definition of work was an obligatory, engaging
Uh,
activity that ends in a certain not reward but outcome. So
Obligation and duty. I can 100% get behind
obligation and duty.
sex should never feel like obligation or duty. No.
Yes, so I love that we're talking about it because that was
Mhm.
how I'm like, of course it shouldn't feel like work. If you are, I think in one of them, it's like, how many people want to stroke a penis to orgasm? And it's like, I'm not really getting much to this. This can feel like an obligation, a duty, and it can come across as work. It is a job. It is a thing. It's like, okay, we got to get to the orgasm. Just like I go to work so I can put in the hours I'm supposed to do here so I can then get paid so I can do something I want. Well, I'll do this so that my partner will leave me alone for 4 days. That's
Mhm.
not, or I have to have sex this way, and that's the work. So I was starting to think of it in the sense of the work, but the way you're describing it, absolutely. Like you have to put in work in that sense. I'm even thinking of vacations. Like I love to camp,
Mhm.
but camping doesn't
Oh,
come
it's so
easy.
much work.
It is so much work to relax. And sometimes it's like, why do we do this? It's like,
The
oh, we get
preparation and the cleanup of camping is a whole nother week ahead of time and afterwards.
yes, it is. And you can try things to make it easier, have a camping box, you can do these other things, but it in the end, it's where are we going? The plan, the get there, the setup. And then you can sit down and start enjoying it. But then you're like, oh my gosh, we only have half a day or a full day. And then pack things back up, get it back home. Now unpack and get showered. And like you've got to, there's a lot that gets into camping. And that involves work that oftentimes I find is very rewarding. But if you were to start saying, like, okay, well, my job is now camping, and I was bringing a bunch of people and I was teaching them how to camp, like it would become that would be a different type of work for me.
Good. Yeah. Defining work. That might have should have happened in this book.
I agree.
Because I do think that there takes intention and effort, but it probably shouldn't feel like drudgery. There should Like
Yes.
what you said is that it was worth the effort. There was a reward there. And often duty sex, there's not a reward there other than avoiding a uncomfortable conversation or avoiding tension.
Yeah.
That's not really what we're looking for.
And I like that you described that too. You had to put in effort with 4 kids and a
Mhm,
relationship to find
mhm,
something that was worth it for you versus,
mhm,
yeah, that was just another thing. It was the laundry and then sex. And yeah,
mhm.
great method there. Okay, well, let's jump to the next one. Women need to feel pursued in order to feel desired. The rat sex that we were talking about.
His analogies. Yes, tell us about rat sex, Braxton.
So with the rat sex, the research study he was talking about, and I thought he was going to go with Emily Nagoski's like, ooh, do we like approach? Do we not? No, he went with how do rats initiate coitus? And that is that the female rat comes up, turns around, shows her genitals, and is like, do you want this? And
She waves her ass in front of the man, lets him
do
get
you
a
like
sniff.
this?
Yeah,
And then the rat goes, I do want this. And it's like, chase me. And then
chase me.
she chases until the male rat is essentially just exhausted, is like ready, tip over ready. And she goes, you've worked hard enough. Here you go.
Here you go. Reward.
Like, I guess we've done this. We can have sex now. So the art of the chase in this is what Snyder is bringing to the conversation, saying women want to feel chased and men need to do the chasing. So again, I took this as it is really hard. Maybe I'm not going to be able to write a book because I've got to come in with a hard, this is the problem solve and this is what works for everyone. And I'm like, I just don't live in that world mentally. And I'm like, some women like to chase, someone like to be chased into other times. Other women like to do both. It depends on the situation. I think that's a lot of what it is. And I'm like, there's a lot of guys that like to feel chased or want to be desired. In fact, I would say that most of when I talk with people and feeling out of control in their sexual behavior or in a relationship with someone that they're feeling distress in and they want some different sexual experiences, or they're saying they want more sex, very often it starts to funnel down into, I really like the fantasy of being desired or being desired by my partner. And in that, there's a little bit of a chase. I want you, come here. So even as he was putting in there of like, women need to feel pursued, I'm like, hey, let's not forget that some guys want to feel at least a little part of it. And I would say that some would like to feel pursued and chased as well. And that can switch, but that was my take on it.
Okay. Yeah. So when you were hearing it, you were hearing the gendered language and saying, wait, I don't think you're representing what men want to. That
And that all women, all you got to do is chase the girl. You chase the girl, and she's gonna be like, I can't not
I
say
can't not.
yes. You pursued me for 2 weeks.
I had an issue with this. So I feel like I'm like being super negative about the book. It wasn't my favorite, but I completely respect this man's experience. I completely respect this man's clinical knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't hear women saying, I want to be pursued more. I hear women saying, I feel like all he wants from me is sex. And that's a desire killer for them. So I was a little worried that this chapter would be read by well-meaning men who were going to start chasing their women around the house with grabby hands and big eyes. And that actually is a turnoff for most of the women I work with. I think they want to be wanted, but not taken.
Yes. To be wanted.
But when they feel like there's that chasing around the house with grabby hands, there's a, wait a minute, do you care about how I feel, how I want? Like there's a lack of consent there sometimes. So his language was also most women, most men. And I didn't like the language choices because I'm a little more nuanced. It sounds like you are also. Some women, some men.
Yes. I also like that he brought in, when he's saying being pursued, there was a way that he worded it, at least maybe in one of the pages, that I was like, oh, I get on board with it. I like that. the thought of the pursuit was kind of along the lines of simmering, I think, as well, which is like, I
I
want
liked
you.
that. Mhm.
Yes. And the simmering seemed to be a part of this, that it wasn't just like constant, want to have sex? Hey, whoa, you're so sexy. Let's do it right now.
Yeah,
That
because that is a
wasn't.
little bit more my population. I'm like, whoa, that's not hot to her, right? And
Yes. It's like, oh,
and so I did like when he brought in this technique of simmering, which is basically like flirting, putting something on the back burner and just giving it a little bit now, then a little bit then a little bit here and there. Um, I do think that flirting and that constant feeding a tiny fire can be really helpful. But I was worried that some people would read this and be like, "Honey, why don't you like this? I'm supposed to chase you around. That's what the rats do."
that's what the rats do. Aren't you a sexy rat?
Yeah.
We did so my partner and I were listening to it at the same time, or at least in the car at one point in time, and now ever since then we've she'll come up and like hold me or something like that, and I'll go simmer simmer simmer.
Simmer, simmer, simmer.
And she's like, "Is this the simmer?" Like now it's just become kind of a good joke, and that's been playful sexual fun. But and I like that aspect of like, oh look, this is active throughout the day. It just became more top of mind. But that
Yeah,
pursuit is different than.
and I think that works when there's confidence that a no could be okay. But so I'll talk a lot with my couples about when there's sexual security in a relationship, the simmering feels enjoyable. When there's sexual insecurity in the relationship, the simmering feels like pressure.
Mhm.
So when two people have the confidence that if it happened, that'd be great. If it didn't, it's fine. The simmering is really fantastic.
Yeah,
But if person starts to, oh, he's starting a simmer because he wants to have sex tonight, and I'm not sure if I can do that, the simmering doesn't feel warm.
yeah, that's so.
So um, So I think these rules he was kind of laying out work most for couples who have sexual security and are just trying to keep it going long term. I
Mhm.
don't think the points work for couples who are sexually insecure, who have never had sexual security and are trying to create it for the first time. So I did make a distinction of who I thought the book was for, and it was for sexually secure couples trying to keep things going long term.
That makes sense. I like that. Well, I think moving to the next one, where we're looking at identifying sexual knots, giving couples the chance to reconnect and try a new approach. What were your like? Did you have any pushback or any acceptance of what knots in a couple look like, and how that shows up with who you work with?
No, I think that was true. It was at this point that he, maybe that's why I like the last half of the book. I think this is chapter 4 or 5. He starts acknowledging there are issues where couples get stuck, and he talked about them as knots.
Mhm.
And at this point, he started to introduce, the idea that this can be complex. And so I appreciated that because up to this point, it felt too simplistic to be realistic.
Mhm.
And most of my couples do have knots that we have to untangle and learn from them. And so at this point, then he brought that listening to your sexual self back and what is this not trying to teach you about the relationship or about your sexual self? And it was probably at this point in the book that I got on board.
Yeah, right. I think that's where my switch was too. It was like, oh, this isn't a fix it book. And as much as we'd love to have fix-its, I haven't seen, heard, and I figure if we have found a fix to sexual experiences, we'd all the therapy world would also be like, and this is it.
Yeah, I'm trying to
This
find
fixes that.
this fix. I'm trying to find this section in the book. Um, And he's got one chart in here that's interesting. He's talking about, for some situations, thinking about sex created the feeling of anticipation, but now it's creating dread. That's a knot. Let's figure that out.
Mhm.
For some couples, after having sex, people feel satisfied, but now you're actually feeling relief that it's over. Let's figure out and listen to that knot. And then the third one was, you know, one of the partners isn't in the mood. It's normal to feel disappointment, but when some people start to feel rejection, that they aren't going to have sex or relief that their partner doesn't want to have sex, that's a knot that we've got to work on and learn from. And so then he started laying out some of these more common situations that I see with couples and looking at, okay, it used to feel like this when we were sexually secure, and now it's feeling like this, and this is what we've got to learn from to unravel the knot.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. And I would say that this shows up in most of my couples work when it comes to sex. Like when it comes to sex, either they have, if they've got their baseline of where we were and then it dropped off, or I work with a lot of couples that from the day they engaged in sex, it was they don't really have a baseline of like, oh, this is the secure space, and we're trying to get to that. The knots can be a little harder to identify because there's not a contrast. But finding the contrast and supporting
what we want it to feel like versus
yes.
what it's actually feeling like, that can teach us a lot.
I agree. And it's funny, like, so I was going to ask you too. I'm like, do you think these are knots of like in a string? And you said unraveling. So I'm like, okay, the string. And I was like, is this a muscle where we're like massaging that thing out? Where
His
sometimes
analogy wasn't very clear. And then he mixed this analogy with a food analogy that got me confused at one point. He's like, let's unravel. I can't remember. It was, but I was picturing a knot in a string.
Yeah. I mean, call it semantics, but at the same time, I'm looking at it going like, but I want to know what you mean, Dr. Snyder.
What do you mean?
What do you mean? Because I need to know, as a therapist, am I needing this knot out?
Am I
Are we trying to like
massaging
pull
it?
a string through and unravel and oh, now we have the string that we've got. But I was thinking of it in the sense of a muscle knot, where sometimes it can oftentimes feel that way. You know, if I've got a knot right here in my rhomboids. Go get a massage. It'll relax, but you need to keep massaging that and try and help
Work it
release it.
out.
You don't usually
Release
just
it.
knock it out in one full blow. It's like, oh, this worked. And then it'll start to come back. We're like, oh, we need to massage that again, or we need to relax, or I need to stretch. And those are things we can do sexually. Let's talk about it. I need to try my mindfulness again because I haven't seen personally and I haven't heard from anyone anecdotally that they've done one thing and then it just never comes up again. It's things that have come up in the past can sometimes spike fear, can sometimes be re-triggered, can be affected by other sexual things that show up. And so sometimes you get to know like, oh, yeah, I'm easily distracted in sexual experiences, or I experienced a negative non-consensual sexual experience when I was younger or in my last relationship. And that worry pops up and I can relax and kind of take care of myself in those scenarios. And I can also ask for help from my partner, just depending on that was how I was imagining the knot, like needing those out. Sometimes they can return a little bit, but maybe they're not as tight as they used to be.
And some maintenance. I like that idea.
Yes, maintenance. Which I think also kind of takes us to this next question, or not question, but theme of it, which is when each partner stands their own ground, they can deal with an uncertainty of change in their relationship, which I really blew that in the spelling on this. Relationship.
There's no spell check in StreamYard. Right?
I know. And then I just blowing through it, throw that extra O in. But this sounded a lot like Dr. Schnarch combining, at least for me, I was conceptualizing in differentiation.
Yeah, this feels very differentiation. I can get behind that. And it's unusual to find a model that is a traditional relationship structure that enjoys differentiation. So I'm like, all right, maybe there's a little more nuance there. And differentiation came from Bowen and Bowen theory, the father of systems theory, the father of family therapy, and Schnarch has taken it. Terry Real has taken it. A lot of therapists have really taken it, where there needs to be the balance of self with the relationship. That being a doormat leads to enmeshment, which is never healthy for a relationship. But over dependence leads to disconnection and coldness. And so differentiation is that ability to balance self with the relationship, the needs of the relationship with the needs of the individual. That's differentiation. And that means we have to stand our ground sometimes. And that's very difficult for a lot of us, especially if we were raised to be people pleasers or to make people happy or to sacrifice always for the good of something else, that makes it very difficult to stand their ground. For when people say, I'm not in the mood, and well, I need sex to be part of our relationship. And both of you are taking a stand, and that's the point at which we can make lasting change. When someone's continually giving in, giving in, giving in, giving in, it's going to create more and more enmeshment. But someone else continually leaning out, leaning out, leaning out, leaning out is going to create estrangement. And so we always need this balance. And I did like that he brought it up, because some theories don't like to incorporate differentiation. But I think for sex to be consensual and mutually enjoyable, we have to have differentiation as part of the framework.
Yeah, I love how you're describing it. I often refer to the clients as kind of like you've got two parts and you lean into each other, and that creates some pretty sturdy foundations and connection. Like you can take this part away and it's not like this is leaned all the way over, where
Mm-hmm.
if this is taken away, it falls flat, or they're both laying on each other, or we're both so far away that we're not even touching, we're not really
Mm-hmm.
engaging. That the mentality is I can stand on my own and lean into you,
Mm-hmm.
you can lean on me, and we can trust and build that secure engagement. But I'm not dependent on, if you're sad, I'm sad. If you're
Mm-hmm.
happy, I'm happy. If you're satisfied, or in order for you to be satisfied, me to be satisfied, you have to experience blank.
Yeah. If you said no to sex, I'm crushed.
Yes. Yep.
If you initiated sex, what I want doesn't matter. These ideas that we've got to be able to take our partner's honesty about a sexual situation, their wants, their desires, their sexual personality,
Yeah.
and figure out how we're going to work with it, because it will be different than ours. The idea that we marry or commit to someone with an erotic map that matches ours is just really troublesome myth.
It is, especially because we that falls under the thought that once you've had your sexual experience, it's solidified. The same thing is the way you have sex when you're in your 20s is the same as when you're in your 40s or 60s or 80s. And that's not true. It changes and evolves over time. You find your likes, you drop others, and it just like foods. You may like things when you're younger, you may change, but we accept that change as we get older. And we also have dietary things that can show up. We're like, oh, I need to adjust
Yeah.
for this reason. And that's the same thing when it comes to sex. Oh, I need to adjust because my body has changed. And there can be
I
grief
have a
along
swollen prostate. I have a sore hip. I have chronic pain. I'm going
I
through
had a
menopause.
surgery.
I just had a baby.
Uh,
My blood pressure is dropping. I have sleep apnea, which I see affecting men's health so much. Untreated sleep apnea impacting their sexual functioning so much.
yes,
So,
absolutely. So there's a lot that plays into, if you can stand in your own, whether male or female, and be like, I'm still a worthy sexual person and my desires are okay. And then it's okay that my partner may not want to engage in those desires or whatever it may be, but like you can still be yourself. That plays a huge role in being able to address that uncertainty and become curious and explore more without it feeling like a personalized attack.
yeah, I do think most win-win situations for couples come when they're each standing their ground
Yeah.
without attack or defense or blame. Just,
Yeah.
this is what I want. Well, this is what I want. Okay,
Mhm.
this is our starting place for growth.
Yeah,
know?
and maybe we'll experience it. Maybe we'll experience part of it. Like there's the uncertainty in the exploration, not the, oh sweet, if I hold out long enough, I'll get exactly what I want. You can work through
Mhm.
grief. You can work through excitement. You can work through the middle ground. There's a lot.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah, I agreed with this point. Mhm.
this leads us to the last here, that sixth point of it, which is erotic feelings return when partners feel deserving of each other's love.
Mm.
And this comes to another space where I was like, okay, Cami, how did you define deserving? Because I have seen that show up in different ways, and I don't remember him defining what deserving means. I can share mine. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Okay, I was interpreting this as feeling worthy. I think I was interpreting deserving as worthy, or a positive entitlement. Um, I equated it a little bit with body issues, with women not feeling like their body was good enough to be enjoyed erotically, that they were self-conscious. I was putting that a little bit there. I'm a big Ted Lasso fan. I don't know if anybody else is a Ted Lasso fan, but in this last episode, Keely's walking away, and Rebecca says to Roy Kent, he's like, I think she's with someone. And she said, yeah, someone who knows they deserve, or who believes they deserve her. And it kind of hits him because he's letting this relationship end because he doesn't think he deserves to be with someone. So I think that shame and our self-image and our self-worth can undermine our relationships. And that's what I understood when he said erotic feelings return when partners feel deserving of each other's love, that I'm no better than you, but I'm no worse than you.
Yeah.
Coming from that really centered self-esteem.
Yes. Which I think leads, or is a part of that last thing we just talked about, which being secure in yourself really helps. The reason I was holding on deserving is because oftentimes I will hear people really push back on deserve. You don't deserve, no one deserves anything.
Like entitlement. Nobody owes you anything.
Yes. Yes. Or it's like, well, you eat that chocolate bar, go on that vacation, you deserve it. And some people are like, okay, this deserving and everyone deserves everything. I think that could really derail. I love the way you defined it. I was on the same level of when you feel deserving, you're not on the corner being like, oh my gosh, she is more this, he is more that. And how could I ever be loved? Like if you're like apologetic because your partner wants you, that can be a turnoff. That can be a problem. That can take eroticism out of it because this person now has to step out of an erotic space into a rescuing space.
Yes.
Or the same space going to the other side. If you're like, well, I do deserve this, and you give this to me, that leads into exploitation and non-consent, or the actions that have to be done, or else there's disappointment on the other end, which takes away that ability to stand your ground. But if you feel deserving, like, yes, you love me, I love you, we feel a connection, I do deserve this in the sense that we do a lot of things together, and this is great, and I can receive what you give me, but I'm also great in myself of what I want. That seems to really allow for eroticism to flow, because we can express what we want, receive what we've asked for, versus that game. Do you ever see that happen with your couples where they ask for what they want and they get it, and they're like, well, it's just because I asked you. And like, would you just sit in it and be like,
thank you.
Wow,
thank you.
I got what I wanted. This is cool. And not go into, oh, it's just because I asked you, or it'll never happen again. It's like, well, let's hope that it happens again. Let's talk about that. Let's identify how we can continue getting more of that and how you can return that. But
yeah, I think it really comes from that place of I'm not better than you. I'm not worse than you.
yeah.
We are equals. And so, free from entitlement. Deserving gets yucky when we believe something's owed us.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think in this case, I was reading deserving as worthy of, or a healthy entitlement, not a selfish entitlement.
Absolutely. So, Cammie, what would you, let's go. We're going out of 10 sexies.
Okay.
What would you rate it?
I don't know. I guess I'm going to say 5, because ultimately, if I boil down, I agree with the major points. I may have taught them differently. And I come from a partnership approach, not a traditional approach. He said, his background is in the church, and much more of a traditional family household approach. And that was kind of evident. But the points themselves, I agree with. The examples I didn't love, and the metaphors I was not a fan of.
Yeah. And I think that I agree with you. I was flirting with 5.5 and 6. But then I was also thinking of 4. I would say that
because you almost stopped listening.
I almost stopped listening. And I was like, the only reason I was on the 6 is I was like, I can think of a couple of couples that follow the traditional model that are easily distressed by thoughts outside of my partner is the only thing that should be turning me on. But I have this theory, or not theory, fantasy.
This belief, yeah.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I've got 2, maybe 3 couples that I could say, read this book. And even then, I'm like, get past the first 2 chapters. Like, you can just there's good spots, and I think it would speak to them. And then I'd put them, but even then, I put it at like maybe a 6 for those. But if I was just to be like, hey, everyone, you should read this book, that's where I put it at about a 4. Got good concepts, but I just don't know how it would land. I think there's too many places that if someone believes more on this side, or isn't so much about the tradition, or it goes to male female role models or roles within there, it could derail so many people that I think it would be really hard
It
to
was very
grow.
gendered of
Yeah.
men need this and women need this. And
Yeah.
in my experience with, couples under 50, there's a lot less of that. There's
Yeah.
much more of the idea that we're more the same than different.
Absolutely.
But
So
there's a ton of gender stereotypes in this book.
tons and tons. So again, I mean, it's good to have books on here that are not our favorites.
But have good points.
Yeah, good points. I mean, it's something I like that we can take that and then say, hey, if this falls for you, this actually might be a book worth looking into to glean parts off of. But I don't know that this would make my book recommendation. It's pretty deep in that level. So
I would totally recommend Magnificent Sex
Oh, yeah.
over this, which
Absolutely.
addresses all of these points.
Yes, it does.
But better.
Well, cool. We're at that time for today.
All right.
Cami, always great to start off the seasons with you, especially with these books. We're looking forward to the last episode in this season will be another sexy book club. So we have more that we're working towards. I don't know that we've officially decided on that, but tune in next week and we'll have the book ready for you, and we're going to start into it.
Yeah. Join us next week. So these, next 5 Mondays, we'll be here live Monday mornings.
Woohoo! Okay, thanks you again. We'll talk to y'all later.
See you later, Sex Explorers.